Hi guys, it's James here with the Project Esports podcast. We have a special guest to do a interview with us, Justin M. Jacobson Esquire, part of the Jacobson Firm, who's agreed to spare some of his time with us and chat with myself and Dylan. Dylan, go ahead, my friend.
Yeah, so I guess we'll go ahead and just kick the interview right off. Justin, do you just want to tell us a little bit about your background, maybe some history on what you've been doing and kind of where you're at right now?
So as you had mentioned, I'm an entertainment, sports, and esports attorney based out of New York City. So I work on behalf of professional athletes, musicians, professional gamers, and other creative people, and I help them with their legal matters. Most of it's contracts and trademark and copyright based. But as things get bigger, you start dealing with visa and immigration stuff, certain tax, and just general marketing and brand protection. So I really kind of help creative people with the business and legal side that is sometimes very foreign to them. And recently, and I guess is one thing that you had mentioned, that there's been an emergence of a whole new professional area in some of these new emerging, media areas, including esports.
Hmm.
And that's one of the things that I had noticed, a little over a year ago at this point, that someone like me who worked primarily in the entertainment, music, and major sports world to kind of come in and bring some of that knowledge and clientele and kind of just know how to that space that is attracting all those kind of you know mainstream athlete and other professional sports business investors.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of the spot where it gets worked in the most. I guess is the almost entertainment athletic side of things as far as law more than really anywhere else.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like most of them is like, basketball player, you just want to go shoot the ball. Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to worry about like having to play jock tax and because you play games in all these different states and based on how many times you go to Cleveland to play the Cavaliers, you have to pay X amount of dollars for your game check. If four of your 82 games are in Cleveland, you know, 482 of your income tax has to be paid to them. Like you're not you can't worry about those things. There's too many other things you have to worry about.
Oh yeah, cool. No, that's a really a good way of kind of painting the picture there. Yeah, for sure. Um, how did you kind of get into this? Like, I guess starting with entertainment, like leading up to that, what kind of pointed you in that direction?
Well, I've always kind of been involved in the entertainment industry in, one form or another. I've worked at a few different labels at
Hmm.
MTV, helped manage and work in, nightlife and with certain club DJs. I kind of just was very familiar with the music and entertainment world. And then just from there, I just started, working through my own marketing agency to work on behalf of a few different athletes, some local Jets and Giants. We did a couple of charity events with some players, and I just really kind of was able to merge kind of what I was learning in the earlier days to what kind of was going on now, and how I was able to kind of bring these branded, curated experiences to the entertainment and sports world. And from that, it just kind of led me to thinking about bringing those same activations over to what's going on in the esports and gaming space.
So, do you think that your story of kind of like working in entertainment and merging in with esports is something that's going to be coming up a lot more often with new people going into the same type of job you are?
Yeah, I mean, in the last couple of months, ICM as well as I think UTA had bought two existing esports agencies. Pretty much, hey, we bought an esports division and bought a couple esports agents that have, a bunch of players. So it's already pretty much the mainstream entertainment Hollywood agencies are taking notice. Like, okay, well, we can send the same ambassadors and talent to Red Bull that we were sending, and now we have gamers that they're interested in. Like now you could have Ninja, who is now like a pop culture figure represented by CAA or some big agency, whatever it would be, and he could maybe be in a Pepsi commercial or something. Like imagine Pepsi with like Fortnite, Pepsi, and Ninja doesn't.
Yeah.
It's not that far of a connection if you have the
Hmm.
right people pushing it.
Yeah, I mean we've already seen it with Dr. Pepper and TSM. You know what I mean? Like we're already
Exactly.
almost there, right?
Every Twitch ad has that.
Yeah. I think it's that and Gillette is the other one I see.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. They own, I think they have some sponsorship in one of the esports teams.
Yeah, I think
So,
this is really interesting because this is definitely something that we don't always see. I think in terms of just like law, the biggest thing that we see is, you know, back in the day of where a few lawyers were coming out and just saying like, oh, I want to advocate for players and whatnot, and these individuals just kind of really stepping up in esports. And we haven't really seen a lot of the, you know, less vocal kind of firms who are actually like sitting back and like getting really invested and putting a lot into the industry.
well, I think that like most of the kids that you're kind of mentioning were kind of born and bred in gaming. Like they've been playing
Yeah.
all of these games. Like most of their clients, like they're able to play with. Like one thing we're talking about is the NBA 2K League. I love being able to log on and see the kids and play with them, and kind of bond on that front too. So like if you're representing Overwatch kids and you can play Overwatch with them, especially if they're Korean, while you may not be able to like really communicate with them, you could at least kind of do something that like you could connect on. So I think that really is where that most of their backgrounds came from, and is a little bit different than where kind of I came from.
It's definitely a different angle to see like having almost that advantage of like having like that unique point of access that they're already familiar with, like both parties are already familiar with, so it doesn't feel as foreign to bond with somebody like into a business relationship that already you can already kind of associate through the game itself. You be 2K, be it Overwatch, like it's a bit of a unique angle, right? Very untraditional, I guess.
But yeah, I mean, the way I look at it, it's like you can go on a golf course and bond with a client. Like, why can't we go in a rec center game and walk on and just kind of pass the ball around and you know, as they say, just talk a little bit, get to know each other. Because it's like, oh, I have a call with my lawyer at 2, or my agent, whatever it is, at 2. Like it's just kind of there's something in their head about that on the phone. But when you're in the party in the headset and they're playing, it's just kind of a lot more natural, and it kind
Right.
of almost like evens the playing field a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. It's definitely a much more casual setting, I guess, right?
Yeah, but at the end of the day, like you need to know how to give informative stuff during, like you know what I mean. Like I'm not just sitting there saying "good shot." Like you got to pitch your stuff while you have their attention.
No, that's yeah, that's oh man, that's definitely true. Yeah. Dylan, do you have anything else, I guess, on this along this topic line?
no, I just think it's really interesting because it's definitely kind of like a merging of two different cultures, and I think it's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So, I guess the next thing, Justin, is going into the actual players themselves. We're slowly starting to see, very slowly starting to see, emergence of players unions in esports altogether. The only two I'm fully aware of is CS:GO's and League of Legends players unions. Um, what is your overall take on them? Do you think they're effective? Do you think they're necessary? Do you think there needs like more titles need them? What's your take on it?
I mean, honestly, that's always one of these sensitive subjects. I think at the end of the day, what we're starting to see and kind of where the idea of players associations and labor unions and comes from is the need for some protection. That there's been stuff going on, whether it's teams not paying, tournaments not paying, just the teams aren't reimbursing, but some stuff's going on that there are enough issues that enough money's at stake that you need competent representation involved. So where the unions kind of come in is, in theory, they're trying to collectively voice the players, securing the best possible working conditions. And, as you were mentioning, the League of Legends Player Association, which is really only for, North American
Yeah,
LCS, is not in Europe or Asia. So they're really kind of putting their limitation on one, you know, country in continent in North America and Canada. So at that point, that's clear. Like there's a lot of European and clearly a lot of Korean and Asian and Oceanic competitors at this top level. So at that point, you're trying to help a lot of people, but you're not really able to help everyone. And as they get bigger and more people involved, and each person has a unique issue that you just really have to realize that while a prayer union can go for the general stuff and try to teach you programs to help you with your money and stress management. You have different and specific issues related to you. Like I was talking to a kid who's, player that's like, okay, I'm 19, like the tryouts for this team are this time. Like, do I enroll in college? And then like, if I make it, I have to leave. Like, I'm like, okay, we got to find out when you can unenroll, like when they're going to charge you kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then you can make your decision based on that, the information then. And it's just like, that's a big decision. If like you, say, okay, like I'm going to make it and you don't get in and you don't make it and you withdrew, that sucks. Like that might be an issue. You might not be able to get in. You might pay late fees. Like you don't know what's going to happen. You might lose a spot in the class that you needed. And, that's an individual situation. And I don't know if a players union who has 20, 50, 100 players, however many it may be, will be able to address that while all of these other players they're all similar issues. I don't believe that you have these huge player associations like, the major leagues like the NFL and the NBA, where you have a floor of lawyers and the negotiation and arbitration division. And, you have multiple people to handle these kind of things. I don't know if these players associations are at that point where they have that kind of infrastructure, like I know that the CSGO one you mentioned has, one attorney who's based out of Europe helping them. So they don't even potentially have U.S., local counsel that's familiar with certain local rules that may be different in Europe and America. The labor laws, there's definitely a big difference between what state you're in and everything. So there's a lot of more local national issues that because you're an international agency and you just don't have the funds to have 10 lawyers, handling these issues, you can't really get to everyone. So even if these things are existing, they're starting to come, it doesn't change the fact that, players need their own reps or attorneys or just someone in their ear that's confident worrying about them. I think that's something that shouldn't kind of be lost in it, though. Like, oh, I'm a professional player, the player agency got me. Like, yeah, until you have an issue and 10 other people have an issue, and it's like, we'll help you when we can, and that might not help you if you have to pay rent and the team's not paying you money, and like and now the League of Legends has to go after them, and if they're not paying you money, they're clearly having issues with money. Like these teams don't want to not pay their players. Like the worst thing they want to have to do is go on Twitter and explain stuff,
Yeah.
Like Reddit is like not, they don't want to have to do the AMAs. Like, I'm sorry for what's going on. Like, we will pay them. Like, they don't want to deal with that stuff.
Yeah, so you see like an inherent issue with how the players union is set up, just because it is already like a globalized, a kind of a globalized, I want to call it like almost an anomaly. You know what I mean? Because you like the players unions that exist now are very localized. They're very tailored to the market and stuff like that. But with esports, again, like you said, like League of Legends is only catering specifically to North America, when of course, as you well know, we have the LPL, the LCK, EULCS, I can't remember the Russian league right off the top of my head, but the OPL, we saw like, massive legal issues coming out of the OPL.
International. Yeah. I mean, I just think that the way they are now in their infancy, it's not like feasible for them to be, not like that there's anything wrong with them. I think that it's a great thing that players are getting educated and seeing the need to have representatives and professionals and people on their side, that they're understanding that they're talking about a lot of money and contracts that have far-reaching implications on their life. Like once you're 18 years old and stuff, if you're signing that stuff, unless it's really, really bad and like you was like pretty much threatening you to sign it kind of thing, like you're gonna have to live up to it, and like if you sign a really bad buyout or some kind of right of matching that like that you can't compete in another team for a year or 6 months or whatever it is, like it might really be enforceable. So like the fact that people are starting to understand that there is a need for a professional like me or a representative of the Players Association, whoever it is, I think is a plus. So that's like the way I'm kind of looking at it. That like I think it's great. I think that it's amazing to have people that try to balance the scale a little bit, people that know what they're doing. Because you have these big companies like Robert Kraft and the Wilpons and all of these huge multi-million-dollar guys, and you're negotiating with the 18-year-old in Florida who's really good at PUBG. Like What does he know
Yeah.
about the 25-page agreement that you're giving him? Trust me, he really doesn't know what it says.
Oh yeah, exactly, right?
Like,
Exactly.
So it sounds like the player unions definitely aren't living up to what they need to be. And we actually had a list of questions, so I'm going to kind of just merge two of them together. But it definitely sounds like you're more on the avenue of instead of focusing so much on the unions, we need to be working towards player advocacy more on like an individual level. So obviously that's something that you push for a lot. Do you think that's being done well right now? And obviously, do you think it's like too and not widespread enough, and obviously needs to be a lot more widespread?
well, I mean, I think it definitely needs to be more widespread. I think that I don't think that there's anything inherently wrong with the union or the unions that are creating. I think that they're great, and it's definitely the right direction. That there's a real acknowledgement on the part of Riot and the part of just these independent gamers that they need someone who's in their corner, who's doing the right things, who's just on their side. Like,
Yeah.
that was definitely an issue early on in esports, and as more people like myself and others are getting involved, you're having more people who have experience. Like I said, you're having people who are used to dealing with the Warners and the Sonys and the Viacoms, these big entertainment companies, being able to now, okay, well, this is how these negotiations go. Like, I'm sorry that you've been negotiating this way for a couple years on these players, but like that's really not going to fly, and you really know it. And
Mhm.
now that like MSG and these big entities are involved in kind of running CLG and all these things, they kind of have to know that if you ask for certain things, you might be able to get them, and that these contracts aren't you have to sign it and that's that, as sometimes people think they are. You know, I think that there's reasonable and then unreasonable. If you're asking for something pretty reasonable and they come back with something that's not too far off, well, you didn't get exactly what you wanted. You did better than you originally were. And I think if you don't even ask for it, then you don't even have a chance to get something better. And I think that without having someone explaining that to you or helping you or encouraging you, hey, well, I don't think it's unreasonable for them to cover this if you go there. Like, let's just make it that if you have to spend X amount of dollars, they approve it and they'll pay you back. Like, I don't think that's unreasonable. Like, they're making you spend this money, so it should be incorporated in the budget somehow. So, I really think that it's just overwhelmingly a good sign that more people are coming in, and that, the need to have unions and more organized advocacy is coming into play.
Yeah, definitely for sure. So the one thing that you brought up was like, the kid in Florida who's really good at PUBG and stuff. And now, how do we get to a point of where that kid, who unfortunately I'm sure it's happened a million times, of where a team has probably approached him and he instantly thinks, oh, I can play for a team, instantly signs that contract and stuff. And, I'm sure there's probably a lot of horror stories out there. How do we go about just like starting to educate some of these kids who are coming up in the scene to actually understand, like, yeah, I need to go out there, I need to be represented fairly, I need to be able to get my fair share of things, and actually seek out people like you?
I mean, that's why I'm here. It's all about trying to educate the masses and let them know that people like me and, our colleagues exist. Obviously check their credentials and ask for recommendations and get an idea of what they've actually done. Everyone claims to be an esport consultant, but like, what have you actually done? Who are you working with? Like, what is kind of your credibility in this? You don't have to be working with every single player in the entire world to be credible and knowledgeable and be able to assist someone. And I think that it just kind of comes with over time, and really sadly, more kids having issues. Like, that's really the problem. That it's like one of those things where like it's not your problem until it's your problem. Like you don't care about your contract until you want to leave your team because like things aren't good, or like they're not doing well, they're not starting you, or they made a trade for a kid and you don't like it. You know what I mean? Everything's good until it's not, and most of the time it's really too late.
Do you think this is one of those things where it's going to get worse before it gets better, before we really start seeing like almost I don't want to say like a cookie cutter way of doing things, but I like this is like we're still like you said, like we're still in very much an infancy stage with a lot of these things, especially with player advocacy, player unions, everything like that. Do you think we still have a fair amount of like growing pains to go through these with these sort of sort of transactions before we have like a solidified way of doing things?
Sadly, yes. I think it's one of those things where enough people have to have issues that matter to people. Someone really influential has to get really, as I say, screwed, get into a
Yeah.
real predicament and not really be able to handle it. That, like, everyone's gonna be like, wow, like, if that could happen to him, like, what do you think the team's gonna do to me?
Yeah. No, that's fair. We almost need an icon as a as
Yeah,
you
we
know
need that
as a
martyr. I'm
martyr.
sorry.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm sorry, but like, Ninja, like Chipotle's gonna have to tip you on a check and say, well, you didn't hit this amount of streams at the time we looked in, and that's what it says in the contract. So, we're not paying you the extra 20 G's. Have a nice day.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, and I mean, and that's just it. We haven't, to my recent knowledge, I don't think we've seen
I mean,
anything
there was
like
like a
that.
big thing recently with like the Nile Esports. I don't know if you saw, like, there was like a joint statement put out with some of, like, some of the other esports attorneys, like, about how this guy systematically underpaid the players and, like, all these other using money to pay for other, like, just really mishandled the funds and caused damage to a bunch of these players that, like, they were borrowing money from people. They were just put in really bad situations because they were expecting this money, and it was like, oh, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And as we know, if the money isn't there, it's probably not coming.
Yeah, I definitely think that's probably a unfortunately very common problem with a lot of these smaller teams and amateur teams, and I mean even some of the esports startups. Like they probably have that kind of story happen a lot more often, and I mean this is probably one of the few times we actually hear about it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have had issues of kids coming with like a 20-page contract, like, well, like, they don't want to play me anymore, like, they're dropping the team, like, what can I do? Like, I need this money. They owe me 3 months. Well, we can try to ask them for it, but like, if they're dropping the team and like they're not really answering your phone call, like, it's probably going to be pretty tough to get you your money.
Yeah. 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 And
So,
then
like,
like I think something unique to the esports community, and I think like probably why I like we need player advocacy that much more is because we're dealing with like an immaturity thing as well, or not immaturity, but lack of maturity, not lack of like life
this is all
experience,
new
right?
to them. Exactly. This is totally new to them. Like, as I'm talking a little bit about the NBA 2K League, like, these kids are 18, 19, 20 years old. Like, I'm
Yeah.
definitely probably the first entertainment esports attorney with platinum records on his wall that said, hey, like, let's talk. Like, good game. You know what I mean? That actually took an interest in them and had a scheduled a phone call with them and kind of was interested in them on that kind of level. So that's pretty much probably new for most all of these kids.
Yeah, and like I mean, like, and that's just it, right? I don't think that anybody's used to that. They're probably not even used to
Like,
anybody.
imagine Rick Fox from Echo Fox be DMing you, hey, Ninja, we want to sign you to our Fortnite team. Like,
Yeah.
Rick Fox, that, like, LA Laker, like, okay, that works.
Yeah. And do you think with that level of prestige, maybe not to somebody to the degree of Rick Fox, but somebody I'd say like along the like maybe like the lower end, but still somebody who has like a decent, they have a decent portfolio put behind them and stuff like that. Do you think that could open up something for almost like predatory contracts as far as like, because like some of the more, I don't know, maybe malicious firms, I don't know how common they would be, could be taking advantage of the players because again, like we said, there's not a lack of maturity, or there's a lack of maturity, there's a lack of experience. Do you think we're going to start seeing more sketchier things come out of this?
I mean, I think at push comes to shove, if people really wanted to push the current big contracts that are pushed around, they're a little bit one sided, they're a little bit ambiguous. Like, I think that if you negotiate a little bit, it becomes a bit fairer and more balanced. So, but ultimately, I think that these are prepared by competent attorneys that know what they're doing and, like, their
Hmm.
industry standard. And, like, that's where hopefully the power of a player agency or, esports advocacy, whatever it becomes, in whatever form it is, to be able to kind of balance the scale a little bit. That's kind of my biggest thing. It's like these guys are coming with, they represent huge companies worth millions of dollars with huge retainers, and like they come with 20, 30 page agreements, and like they're cover a lot of stuff, and they're very comprehensive. And there's a lot of stuff that if you're gonna read through it, like it takes a good hour and a half, 2 hours to really go through with it and explain and understand it. So like that's like the truth of it. That like this isn't like a 5-page agreement that says here's your name, here's how much we're paying with you. If you don't do it by this date, like have a nice day.
Right. Okay.
These are very elaborate. They have, because there's so much ambiguity and flexibility in this stuff. There's so much roster changes and tournament components and streaming components. And, if you're not on the active roster for a tournament, or if we sub you halfway through, there's just a lot of different things that come into play. Like if we use you for a certain amount of promotional events, like, is it tied to a tournament? Like, is it you have to be there 2 hours earlier to do meet and greet? Or is it like a separate thing in addition to that? Like those are two different things. Like if you have to leave 2 hours earlier, like that's not as bad as if you have to go somewhere in addition that would have been your day off.
Right. Yeah.
So
and all of this is kind of laid out, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, are you gonna get paid for this day or that day? Like, if it's a tournament day, like, are we gonna, give you a time a little bit extra because you have to come in earlier than everyone else, or is it just part of your duties? It all kind of comes down to what the contract says. And then, well, let's be real. If the team isn't gonna if you're not gonna ask for more money, why is the team gonna give you more money?
Well, yeah, that's the other thing too, right? Like, I mean, if you're not asking for it, they're not going to be like, well, we're just going to give it to them, right?
Yeah,
like,
well, we could give you an extra $500 per promo event, but because you didn't ask for it, like,
why would we do it?
yeah, exactly. Like, because then the next time we're gonna ask for 1,000. It's like that's the truth of it. That like, I think that some pro league, some of these they may kind of standardize a kind of salary or set a whatever max salary. And, like, I don't know how okay that is at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, it's also eyes in the beholder. Someone's going to pay you X amount of dollars, and it's a lot more than someone else is going to pay you otherwise. Like, do you just have to take it and be happy with it?
Oh.
Especially if someone else will be happily will take it.
Well, exactly, right? And that's just it. You don't want to miss the opportunity either, right? Like, I mean,
exactly. So you kind of feel like I have to take it, even if like I could probably ask for a little bit more, or maybe I think I'm worth a bit more because of this.
And that's just it too. Like I feel like that's where player advocacy comes in so heavily, especially because again we're talking about like teenagers and early 20-year-olds who are being paid to play a video game, which
all
they probably
day and all
day, all night. Exactly, right? So like exactly, like I know me as a 20-year-old when I was a kid, like if I was been like, man, somebody's willing to pay me to play a game. And yeah, it may not be the best contract setup, but they're still willing to pay me to do this. You don't even think.
I'm already doing it all night anyway.
Yeah, and I'm getting paid for it. I'm not gonna try and haggle with these guys. I'm just gonna take it, right?
Exactly, and like that's the mentality of 99.999, if not 100% of people.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Until something happens, until you realize, ouch,
yeah.
Taxes really hurt when you have to pay them, and it's taken right out of your check. That big number gets chopped down way quick, right?
Oh,
so that first job you get at first summer job, and you see the check, it's like, oh, but it said I was getting $1,200. Yeah, but like you didn't know that of that comes taxes and FICA and all this other fun thing.
Oh, that's just it, man. Most of these kids don't even have like a job prior. You know what I mean? Because I mean, that's usually kind of what happens with players that are so good, right? Because they devote themselves to it, right? So these are like you have so many learning experience rolled into one, right?
Yeah, and then you have 16, 17-year-old kids that are like, they're like so good at it 'cause they play all night, and like that's who they're looking at. Like, there's these new academies for Overwatch, same way they're kind of do with soccer. We're just like training these 16, 17-year-old kids to be the next 18 and 19-year-old Overwatch kids.
Yeah, and so actually I had a kind of a related question. So just for like, I guess myself, because I don't know how this process works, and just for transparency of like anyone who is like a younger player who should be going down this road if they're going to get on a team, what does the process in connecting with someone like you look like? So say like I'm 16, 17-year-old kid, I'm really good at Overwatch, and one of the academy teams wants to pick me up, right? And I'm starting to get into it. what does it look like reaching out with you and the process of just working with you and working with the team? Like, how does that whole process kind of look like?
Well, yeah, I mean, what's nice about the internet is, everyone's connected 24/7, whether it's Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or Discord or WhatsApp or Slack, like there's 100 ways for someone to get in touch with you, all through your phone and whatever other apps. So realistically, just kind of reach out. Email is usually the best because, most people have their email and check it pretty readily. But like, if you're like someone that's like, oh, like, hey, DM me, hey Justin, like I got a player contract, I'd love to talk to you. And then it's easy. It's like, okay, we'll get on the phone, we'll see what's going on, we'll figure out what's kind of involved in it, figure out the costs associated and the time that is anticipated. And then it's just like you kind of get to work, and it's a lot simpler than maybe it kind of sounds. And if you're younger, 17, 18, or even if you're 19, 20 years old and you want to have your parents involved, and I definitely encourage that. Like, I've had numerous calls where it's me, the player, and their parents, and I'm like talking to both of them because,
Yeah.
you want them to know that you're in their son's corner and that you got them and that like you're on behalf of them. And I think that you like approach them respectfully, and but you also keep it real. I think that that's one thing that I like to pride myself on is like I'm not going to tell you how great you are if like I think that you're not as great as you want me to tell you are. Like I always think that constructive criticism and people that understand that it's important because you can always get better. Like that's the truth. Like I'm sure when this is done, you can go back and find 5 spots that I could have answered more succinctly or whatever. But the point is you just kind of just get involved, start there, and kind of develop this relationship to where they are comfortable with you. They want to go to you and ask your opinion on stuff. That's kind of what's nice about it is that once they start seeing that you know what you're doing and you're doing right by them, they kind of open up more, and the relationship becomes even better.
So yeah, I guess the two golden rules is kind of one, be aware that you guys exist, and two, reach out in regardless, like in any capacity whatsoever, right? Like that
Yeah,
kind of.
because we're all tech savvy guys, LinkedIn, like we're all looking for these kind of opportunities because that's what this is about is helping people that realize the need for it. Now, like you said, not every 18-year-old kid is going to even think that they should have this big contract looked over by someone because they don't really understand. Like you
Yeah.
said, they'll just get caught in, oh wow, someone's gonna be $1,500 to play the game. Like, all they see is the number,
Yeah.
and that the team has a lot of followers, so they assume they can pay them it. And maybe they're smart and they'll see about other kids on the team and ask them what it's like to work with them. Or you just that's the way I look at it. Is that like kids that are intelligent enough and kind of see the bigger picture will kind of seek out other people's opinions and want other people who are competent in ways that they're not. Like, I don't expect a 19-year-old kid to understand this contract language. Like, I've been a lawyer for, and involved in these contracts for a long time now. Like, I've spent hours, like going through this stuff, understanding it, trying to figure out ways to benefit, whoever my client is.
Yeah, but
So,
yeah, and they're not gonna have like any. That's just it. Like you said, they're not gonna have any clue what half of it means. You know what I mean? Like it's the almighty dollar sign at the bottom for them, and that's kind of it. So I guess in regards to that, and like kind of just bringing it back to how you spoke about a lot of these kids' parents getting involved as well, especially with the younger, like 16, 17, trying to develop them into stuff. Um, do you heavily advocate, especially I guess even when they most are legal to be able to sign stuff on their own? Do you heavily advocate for parents to be involved just so they're aware, kind of what their kids are getting involved into?
I mean, I kind of ask, I always, like I always inquire because, if you're living at home with your parents, like, do they want to know that you're real and that like this is a real contract and that you're taken care of and you have someone who knows what they're doing advising them? Like,
Hmm.
I think that's smart. But like, if you're 23, 24 living on your own and like you're doing your like you're 23, like if you're old enough to make decisions and you feel confident enough, then who am I to tell you otherwise?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Um,
Like if you're a 15 or 16-year-old kid, I would say like we should probably talk to your parents. Like are they from what's going on? Like I don't want some and honestly those contracts wouldn't be enforceable without their parents signing it.
true enough.
In
Yeah.
most states and stuff. So for anyone under 18, you probably need the parental signature anyway or guardian.
Yeah. No, that's because that's a good point.
So
Have anything I guess in this scope because I'm looking to like I guess tone it down a little bit from the legality unless you have anything else there, Dylan. No.
Nope.
Awesome. So I spoke briefly before we started up the interview about the expansion draft tonight that happened. I know this is a big focus point for you. I wanted to kind of get your impression of the 2K League altogether. What you thought was good, what you thought was bad, what do you think they, what they could improve on, stuff like that. Kind of your take from it, I guess. Even from your position, I guess in the industry as your job, or like just your personal opinion of the league as a whole. Like, what were your takeaways from it?
well, yeah. So as you said about 3 hours ago, there was the NBA 2K League expansion draft where the four new teams, including the Lakers and the Nets, which is exciting in itself, drafted some of the players that weren't protected from the original 17. So honestly, I loved it. I had a great time. I went to the studio to watch it live numerous times. I was there for a few tournaments, so I got to see the teams winning and watch the finals and watch them win. And I was there for the actual 2K League finals. So, I really got to understand and feel a lot of the different atmospheres when you have like this New York crowd that's like, oh my God, they're going to win the championship. This is amazing. Like we're witnessing history that like 10 years from now, like if the 2K League is huge, like I was there that when the Knicks won the first championship. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So like, the way I look at it is that I think that they did a great job. They pretty much throughout the whole thing enhanced all aspects of it. So some things that I just noticed from the beginning to the end was, first a huge change, which was a crowd favorite, was changing to the 2K cam. The broadcast cam and what was presented on Twitch, they changed it so it was more of like the point of view of the point guard, so you can kind of see the court in front of them, which
Right.
is what most traditional players play on. And I think that once they made that switch, the whole broadcast just like elevated. And then eventually they kind of added a stats tracker and, added more in season player stats and, adding the live player cam and just the live looking during the huddle. So they really took criticism and enhanced everything. So realistically, I think they just need to continue to do it. Like they do it in all the other major sports. You have ESPN and all the other sports stations that really have a model down pretty well. That all you have to do is kind of continue to develop these things. And what was nice about the studio was they kept adding new things to it. They added like a gaming setup and additional screens that just showed the box scores. And as it went on, they started to get more crowd engagement, throwing out T-shirts to the fans and little foam balls and everything. So they really tried to cater to the fan a little bit more. But I do think, and I hope this is a focus for season 2, that they kind of continue on that. Esports is electronic, but it's also entertainment. And
Yeah.
I think that what's nice about this in particular is it's 5-on-5 basketball, like people trash talking, like there's intensity, like you're close enough that like you could be like, yo, you're gonna miss that shot kind of thing, and they'll hear you, especially if you're kind of yelling it. That they need to kind of keep that excitement, continue with the crowd engagement. Like, I would have loved if someone did a choreographed dance. Like, I kept saying, do the Remember the Titans thing. Like, all of you guys come in and do, like, an organized little thing. You will definitely get on Sports Center. You will probably be on Bleacher Report. Like, these are the cultural things that I think would just keep elevating it to, like, wow, like, that was pretty cool. Like, like what if you all like had like Ray-Ban sunglasses in your pocket and you all turn around and put them on and did like a little organized thing? I don't know. Like I think at the end of the day, it has to get more towards, the WWE kind of,
Entertainment.
you
Yeah.
finding a personality, a storyline, a team, whatever it was. Like everyone was rallying behind the Knicks because they were like the Cinderella story, like making the playoffs by winning a tournament, and otherwise they would have been the second worst team, and then they beat the best team in the Blazers, and then they go on and win a championship. Like, but you couldn't have wrote a better story
For
to have
season one.
for New York.
Yeah.
And then you throw on top that it's the Knicks, which we all are familiar with. The New York Knicks basketball is not
It's not.
winning in college. Exactly. I don't
Yeah.
know if people are expecting any championship or deep playoff runs, pretty soon, or this season at least.
Hmm.
So I think that then you just continue with that. That like, the way that the crowd was changing, and the more packed that the crowd is becoming, it just needs to continue with that. Like, I think they got to give away more stuff and have more incentives, and like give locker codes, and all of these things to really get. Like I always felt like you need to get people there, do things. You go home with a T-shirt from it or a little ball. Like that's something you're gonna have. Like you may be throwing it around with your friend or wearing it, and people are gonna ask you about it. Like that's the viral, organic way to grow things.
Yeah,
So
basically
I
just
hope
make
that
it mimic like a regular sports game. Like you go out there, I mean, they have like the t-shirt cannons, everything. They're shooting it. They're having special nights of where they're getting the audience engaged into it and doing special things. I mean, why not just do it for the esport too?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. And, as the players start developing their storyline more, it makes it that much more engaging. Because everything's in New York, you'll never really have a quote unquote home game other than maybe the Knicks or the Nets now.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's not going to be 50 Portland Blazer fans there on the weekend in New York. Or, I don't expect it. So, chances are that there's never going to be that kind of rowdy atmosphere for one of the geographically located teams.
Right. And that's the kind of thing I wanted to ask you because I guess in regards to other esports, I found the 2K League had its own unique atmosphere. Like you said, like with the trash talk. Like I mean, like I remember the first game I think I watched was it had Hood in it, and Hood, I'm sure as you know, is a pretty vocal player. Like I mean, that was something I have never seen. I've never experienced watching this, kind of like trash talk back and forth when these guys are seated like right across from each other. You know what I mean? How like
Yeah.
do you that sort of atmosphere isn't mimicked in any other esport? What was that like in comparison? Like was that like was it kind
It
of
was
like
great.
yeah?
I loved it. It was
You find it
amazing.
was
Like, I honestly, like, there was only maybe one time that like it got like, wow, these kids might fight. Like it got really heated. It was like, because once you have two or three teammates all chirping at one kid, it starts to get a bit more intense.
right?
When like, and because like pretty much it's like the point guard and the center are like, it's like that's kind of who are across from each other, and then it like wraps around to the other team's point guard and center.
Hmm.
So like if you're, usually centers are most of the time vocal, and usually the point guards are vocal. So like they're usually kind of going at each other, and if one of them isn't as vocal, it could get interesting to say the least. And I think it's great as long as it's done tactfully and respectfully. It's like kind of the like I was always saying, it's like the street park mentality. Like you don't want to shoot that shot. Like you're gonna pass the ball. I know you don't want to shoot. Like I got you. Like I guard. Like you're not scoring on me, so you just better pass it, kind of thing. And it's like that adds that psychological warfare that exists in this atmosphere, that exists in the actual professional basketball league, and that exists in really every professional sport league. Some of the NFL players that I've talked with, like that's what we used to talk about. Like what are you guys kind of doing? What's it like? And he's like, yeah, man, it's all about like learning each other's tendencies, the positioning of their feet. Are their hands tense? Are they relaxed? Like, are they getting ready to block on a route, or are they a little bit more fluid in their hips, ready to run a route? Like, you start picking up on, is his right foot first, or is both of his feet set at the same time? You start picking up on these things because that becomes the difference at that level. And I
Hmm.
think that what's nice about this is you can add that whole psychological thing where like, oh, we're doubling you. So now you hear someone yelling while you're also playing and trying to make this split-second decision in a double team. It adds a whole entire other element that wouldn't otherwise exist.
Right, and the big takeaway is it needs to remain pretty much banter. It doesn't get like malicious, right? Like that's
Yeah,
that.
no, like all
Yeah.
these kids are really like what's nice is that like most of them are friends with each other, are former teammates, like they all play with each other. Like I bet you that if you picked 50 of the kids, they would be like, oh yeah, I played with this kid before, like
Mhm.
this kid for 3 years, like they kind of grew up and developed this community within itself. And 2K just kind of went in and plucked 102 of them and said, okay, you guys are the blessed. Here's your in-game icon and your Twitter verification. Have a nice day. Let's play.
Yeah, yeah. The big thing we've talked about it on our show a lot, especially with when it was in its infancy and when it was kind of coming up and they were developing, like because you had said before they kind of developed these things on the fly as they went on throughout the season. How do you see longevity with this? How do you see this being something that like has like a good run of like maybe 4 or 5 seasons and then kind of fizzles out, or do you see this kind of like staying hand in hand with 2K as long as the game is being made, pretty much?
I mean, I think that realistically, and I believe that this has legs. That like their plan is global. Like Bayern Munich already set up their own team, and they're just playing other local German pro am teams, and like just developing content and creating a social media and infrastructure in hopes for when it goes international, they'll already be 5 steps ahead of everyone else. AS Monaco, which is I guess an Italian, one of these other foreign soccer teams, just entered into a partnership with Magic Gaming so they could start to kind of learn how to run this kind of operation over there and start getting some of the brand partnerships that they're working on. So I think that these are really smart companies that have made lots of money, run by really, talented people that know what they're doing. So if they're already investing their time and resources into this when they could be spending that same time on something else, there has to be a reason for it.
Right.
And I think that adding the Lakers and adding the Nets will just really amplify it. Like it's a shame that the Warriors and the Kings, the two Cali teams, didn't really perform that well. But now you have a Lakers team that looks like they have two pretty good pieces and someone who can hopefully after being a high draft pick and having all that spotlight on him, be able to go to another place that has a spotlight and still succeed. And I think that those markets add a lot to it.
Okay.
And that's what I hope. I think that ultimately the numbers just have to continue to grow. And I was pleasantly surprised with the finals numbers. Like I was like, if there's 25, maybe 50,000 people, that would be amazing. There's like 65, 70,000 viewers.
Yeah. It was pretty impressive. Yeah.
So like to me, like wow, when you've been averaging 7,500, 10,000, maybe 15 to 20 in a tournament, and now you're at double or triple that, like that's a significant increase.
Yeah.
Like
No.
so that to me shows like okay, like there's enough hype and intrigue by the end of it. So if this new 2K19 is great, and like I don't really know how like tuned in you are with what's going on in like that community, but like people have been nonstop grind. Like people are like gung ho on a mission because now there's some potential end result. Like
Yeah.
people grinding these ladders and Overwatch and League of Legends. Like there was kind of a goal. Like if you got to a certain level ranking, teams and scouts are starting to take notice of you. Like you may run into a real pro, and if like you somehow do well or beat like that's how a lot of these new 16 and 17-year-olds are found. The talent people watch these leaderboards, see who's rising, and then start to see who they're playing with, and that's how you find these kids. Like it's not like some of the other sports where it's like there are these traditional powerhouse colleges. So you go to an SEC school and you're at Alabama, there's an inherent value in being there. Like there's not like these established talent pools.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Wild West at this point, as far as like acquiring talent and stuff like that, right? Like, and that's an interesting angle too. That now that there is something to shoot for at the top of the 2K ladder, it builds hype, it builds a player base, it builds it builds a desire, right? And from what I've seen
Yeah.
in the subreddit as well, like I mean, the 2K19 seems to be more well received than 18 is what I've gathered. I guess they've sorted a lot of the stuff out. I haven't been paying attention too much, but it seems to be better received.
Yeah, I would definitely say that, like, one huge thing in 2K18 that was a problem. But you couldn't really play that well. Like, steals that should have been steals in any other video games weren't steals. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you can really blow by and push people outside the way. Like, when they were trying to get so realistic, they, like, made certain things, like, unrealistic that shouldn't have been. So I feel like they fixed a lot of that stuff. But as with any game, there's still issues and stuff
Of
that
course.
still needs to be worked out. But I think that it just shows that they're going in the right direction, and that like Madden, they always come out with like a new kind of iteration, whether it's about the defense or the playmaker jumping or whatever their new angle that they're focusing on. Where I feel like what's nice about this one is they just kind of took 2K18 and like just made it better and refined it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's I kind of feel like what more traditional esports games do. It's like, you had StarCraft and you had StarCraft 2, then you had the expansion. Like all you're doing is adding and evolving and refining the existing base.
Yeah.
You're not making a drastic change in the meta so that now you have the ability to do way more crazy highlight dunks because of the new super powered jumping boost you get. Like they just like that's kind of what I felt like happened a long time ago with NBA Live. Like, NBA Live '05 was great, and then NBA Live '06 they tried to like make it a little bit more gimmicky, and if you have like the rebounding dunker, like you could just dunk like you were Kareem on like a baby kind of thing, and it started to get so unrealistic that like this wasn't fun. And
Yeah.
so I think that what's nice is that like that's what they're doing with this game. That they're like, okay, we finally found something that's good and working, and that we can just kind of make it better and refine stuff so that it can continue to grow. And that's what I think happened with this game.
No, man, that's awesome. I'm glad that seems to be the direction they're going in. That being said, though, Dylan, do you have anything final? I guess.
No, I don't have any final questions. I mean, this has been, definitely really informative for me at
Oh
least.
yeah. Yeah.
I definitely didn't know anything about a lot of these topics, so definitely super informative.
Yeah, no, Justin, like you've been like a vault of knowledge within this hour, man. Even to the 2K league, like I mean, everything has been it's a unique glance into an industry that's very new and doesn't have a lot of I guess publishings towards it. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of information out there right now yet, and I think it's just because of how it is. So yeah, no, I wanted to thank you, man, for doing this with us. That we greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure, guys. I'm glad that we were, this going, and I was able to drop some knowledge and hopefully, work more towards helping the scales be balanced. I think that every player, even the team, they need to be aware and should encourage players to get someone in their corner. Like they need to let them know that, like, you probably should have someone. Like it's not wrong. Like, maybe they're not thinking about it, but you should be like, like you maybe should get a lawyer. Like, it's a really big contract. I don't know if you really understand it. Like, I do think there's some obligation on behalf of the teams and those people to think about that side. And I think that as more, the unions, back to that, come to play, and the stronger they become and bigger and more influential they become, that's going to kind of be how it's going to be. Where, like, the team's going to be like, okay, well, you guys should have a lawyer. Like, we're probably not going to talk if you don't have someone in your corner
Yeah.
just because we want this to stand up. Like, we don't want you to come back 2 months from now and say, you said I have to sign and I can't get a lawyer, and, like, you didn't tell me I could have one kind of thing. While that may not end up flying, if it's worth enough, it could be a big enough headache that, like, when you're at that big, your exposure for something like that is huge. Especially if they have, the other side has a lawyer or someone that's willing to bring a lawsuit, go to distance, and kind of push on it. It could just be a really expensive thing to deal with. Even if you ultimately win, the economics of winning may just be a loss. Like
Yeah.
you have to spend $50 or $100,000 to defend a lawsuit that like you could have just given them 10,000 and called it a day.
Yeah, you're not winning at the end of the day, right? Like it doesn't
Yeah,
matter if
even
you
if
actually
you
win.
win, and like if you give it, okay, well now you have to give me all the money you spent back. These kids don't have money like that. You're not getting that money.
Yeah, exactly, right? You're never gonna see it.
Yeah, like good that the contract says that. Well, come and get it, like like especially if they're a foreigner and you're here. How easy is it gonna be get your money from the random 18-year-old Swedish kid that you already gave him 10, 20,000, and now you're trying to get some of it back.
Yeah, it's not
I don't
happening.
know. It's gonna be tough, and it'll probably cost you somewhere near that to get it. I'm sure.
Yeah, and then at that point, like, what's at that once you get to there, like, what's the point, right? Like,
Exactly.
yeah. So I guess just to round it up there, man. Do you want to let everybody know your socials? Whatever
Yeah.
where they
So
can find you?
check me out. Justin JESQ, and for the 2K worldwide, Jacobsonfirm.com, JACOBSON. And thank you guys for having me, and I look forward to talking again sometime soon.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Justin.
Yeah, man. Have a good night.
You too.
If you liked that, hit the subscribe button for more interviews and other great sports and esports content. Make sure to also like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter to stay up to date on all the news from your favorite sports and esports players and teams. From our house to yours.